Hello, this is Affirmative Action by Ben Bassett, Henry Pence, Tatiana Rossi, Sasha Leshin, and Marie Kazibwe. So, just a quick rundown of some of the history and context. Affirmative action features two distinct British concepts of positive discrimination and positive action, which are two policies that are supposed to support disadvantaged groups that have previously suffered discrimination in areas in education, employment, and housing. It's enacted to negate racism and sexism, and which are two common reasons that people are denied positions in society. The term affirmative action was first used in the United States in Executive Order number 10925, signed by President John F. Kennedy on March 6, 1961, which included a provision that government contractors take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated fairly during employment, without regard to their race, creed, color, or national origin. In 1965, President Lyndon Johnson issued Executive Order 11246, which required government employers to take affirmative action and hire without regard to race, religion, or origin. This prevented employers from legally discriminating against members of disadvantaged groups. In 1967, gender was added. Just three of the most important laws regarding this. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. President Lyndon Johnson passes the Civil Rights Act, which, in addition to other things, puts affirmative action into law, legally ending discrimination for employment and education based on sex, race, age, and veteran status. Sex, of course, came 3 years later in 1967. Two important Supreme Court cases. Grutter v. Bullinger. This decision upheld affirmative action in the U.S., focused on the University of Michigan Law School in an effort to promote diversity. A few years later, Grans v. Bullinger declared that the University of Michigan liberal arts program's point-based selection method was unconstitutional. The system made it almost impossible for a colored person of average intelligence to get rejected, and therefore received much scrutiny from Caucasian people. A few of the data points. At elite colleges examined by the Times, 6% of non-international freshmen were black and 13% were Hispanic. Black students are underrepresented by at least 20% at 79% of the country's research universities. Hispanic students are underrepresented by at least 20% at 82% of the country's research universities. Fewer African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans obtain college degrees compared to whites. Unemployment rates for African Americans is almost 2 times higher than whites, and the national average showing that even as the economy improved, people of color still experience much volatility. A little bit more about the argument. A man named Alan Back denied admission to UC Davis in 1973, leading the lawsuit to the Supreme Court that ruled that race can be used as a factor for admission. Patrick Hamacher was one of several white students to sue University of Michigan in the previously mentioned Gratz v. Bullinger et al. Hamacher claimed that using race or gender as an admissions factor violates the 14th Amendment or Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The judge ruled that the university's policies did not violate previous Supreme Court rulings, which further solidified race as a factor in admissions. The ruling was later reversed by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, but that ruling was overturned by the Supreme Court. President George W. Bush opposed the Michigan court's ruling and filed a brief within the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in 2003 that race can be used as in admissions but cannot be an overriding factor. The state of Michigan in 2006 approved the proposition banning affirmative action in the state. Other states have followed suit.
Like any other policy, there are costs and benefits to affirmative action. So looking at it from an economic standpoint, affirmative action was meant to develop a stronger workforce and stronger economy composed of people from all backgrounds. A college degree is becoming more valued, though, by employers, meaning it's harder to secure jobs and earn wages without one. So by giving students of color who may lack the opportunities to have access to a higher education, the policy is accounting for those factors that cause the unemployment. However, unintended consequences do occur when the intended accomplishments of the affirmative action policy are misinterpreted. So, affirmative action is commonly referred to as preferential treatment, which is saying that a college may accept a student, for example, only because they are a minority without seriously considering how they would perform at the school. And this can be seen as the school preferring that individual only because of their status as minority rather than assessing their actual academics, which is always important when admitting someone to a college. This leads to unqualified individuals being chosen. And because the individuals are unqualified for the position that they're chosen for, this leads to what is called a mismatch between the students and workers in their school or job. And this leads to usually that person falling behind or quitting and dropping out, which means that they didn't even get to fully reap the benefits of the opportunity that they were provided by affirmative action in the first place, which is defeating the purpose of the policy. In conclusion, the affirmative action policy may be interpreted as being based on distributive justice, and distributive justice is itself based on 4 material principles, which are merit, need, equality, and utility. So, when attempting to apply these principles in a policy like affirmative action, this often leads to different distribution patterns, which would benefit different individuals based on the scheme of pattern. So an example would be like how merit scholarships benefit the best students, but not necessarily those that are most in need, and need-based scholarships aren't necessarily rewarding the best students. The policy is proven effective in positively boosting minority percentages in many top-tier schools and job categories, and making the institutions seem less discriminative statistically, but still, affirmative action might harm its intended beneficiaries in the long run, and this is simply sabotaging the policy's intended modern accomplishments.